On behalf of the WITS alumni here in Israel and Telfed, Jerusalem, and World Mizrahi, it gives me a great honor and privilege to invite our guest speaker tonight this is our first in the Zoom sessions with the WITS and WITS alumni in Israel and Telfed and with the World Mizrahi. So it's a great honor and a privilege to be having the Zoom session tonight. Marcelle, I've known you for many years, and I've always known that you've been a very successful lawyer, but I didn't know about your incredible accomplishments that you've done through the years. So I'm going to just speak a little bit about you and your very, very impressive CV. So without, I hope you don't mind, but it's really quite amazing what you've achieved. And I think it would be really nice for our listeners to know who's going to be presenting our talk tonight. So just a little bit about you, Marcelle. So Marcelle, Juliet, Saul, Sheiman is an advocate. You were you were attorney in the Supreme Court of the Republic of South Africa. And you've been an Israeli advocate for 25 years of experience, also in the business community here in Israel. You currently serve as the chairman of the Israel-South African Chamber of Commerce. And as a South African attorney, you practice in the fields of commercial litigation, ADR and negotiations, and labor law, where you represented many of the African trade unions, as well as other African organizations. As an Israeli advocate, Marcelle has specialized in listing Israeli companies, primarily on the NASDAQ, in the Euro NM in Brussels, and has acted as counsel to law firms requiring her expertise in the corporate finance and international trade spheres of laws. You founded your own boutique investment banking firm, Presidio Strategic Capital, targeting on sourcing and financing innovative Israeli technology companies and providing them with a large range of strategic advisory services. You then furthered your management experience with the technology field by co-founding, together with Mr. Yossi Gross, and managing PharmaLight, an ophthalmic drug delivery company with Rainbow Medical. You have extensive ties in South Africa and other parts of Africa, and in your capacity as investment banker, has targeted on trade and investment opportunities in the emerging African markets by leveraging Israel's technological prowess and entrepreneurial connector skills. And this is also quite amazing. You are the CEO of Anthill, a unique platform of Israeli entrepreneurship, funding and management founded by Ron Lubash, which today conducts as an investment bank to capitalize on opportunities in emerging markets for international source of funding on commodities and breakthrough tech. That's really unbelievable. You currently also act as a legal QA specialist for an Israeli artificial intelligence company in the legal domain. Saul Sheiman has always maintained a strong Jewish identity and ties to those committed to the promotion of the State of Israel. As such, you have featured as guest speaker in numerous diplomatic settings, including the Consulate General of Israel in New York, the Jewish National Fund, and as member of the Speakers Bureau of the United Jewish Communities Federations of North America. You tenured as a senior research fellow with the Institute for Policy and Strategy at the Lauder School of Government Diplomacy and Strategy at the IDC, the center in Herzliya. Also working with two of Israel's national security advisors, including the past member of Israel's Forum of National Responsibility, together with a consortium of Israeli, Jewish, and Arab entrepreneurs. You co-founded, together with Ms. Ruth Gur-Bar Shalev, the late IDF Chief of Staff Mata Gur's daughter, an innovative Israeli NGO, Synergy, that is the coming from peace, that uses breakthrough in broad thinking in order to forge new possibilities for those populations living in conflict areas such as our own to live in peace. You are currently also a board member of Brit Olam, an Israeli humanitarian development organization, which strives to realize the humanitarian values of Jewish culture in the international sphere within the humanities. And you also have psychology and languages majors. Wow. Marcelle, that is an exceptionally impressive CV. We really look forward to your presentation. You are extremely well qualified to speak about the situation in Africa and its potential to help. And without any further ado, I want to give over to our esteemed speaker for tonight. Thank you, Marcelle.
Thank you very much, Les. Really, it's really a pleasure, and I appreciate, really appreciate the forum and the platform. So without further ado, I'd be honored to get started. So good evening, valued audience, colleagues, friends. I really am most grateful to the sponsors of this talk, the University of the Witwatersrand, Alumni Relations, Telfed, the South African Zionist Federation in Israel, and the World Mizrahi, as well as to my dear friends and colleagues, Dr. Les Glassman, Wits University Alumni Rep in Israel, Mr. Larry Pfeffer, and also I see my good friend Roy Scher from Telfed. Thank you for providing me with this platform, and I hope I haven't left anybody else out, but it's good that you're with me, and look forward to talking. So I was called upon to give this talk. The title at first was phrased as a statement: situation in Africa, lack of drinkable water, food, sanitation, energy, basic medical support, education, resulting in illnesses and death, and the potential to help. And as the organizers of the event know, I looked at the title of the talk and indeed wanted to give over a little of my experiences with Africa. Africa the beautiful, Africa the magnificent, Africa the place where miracles happen, Africa to which I'm very close. And I added the question mark to the title. Is it so, Africa as it is described, and the potential for help? So Africa is a big word to swallow. Essentially, it cannot be described as one place, one country. It's a continent, not necessarily having common factors between each country. The title also is meant to give over, I believe, a sense of misery, human disaster, Africa and Africans as victims, as needing aid. And incredibly enough, this also plays into the hands of those who might relate to Africa and Africans as hopeless, doomed to disaster and endless poverty, and into the hands of aid agencies, creating a single distressing image of Africa. This is also something we on the outside have in the past been schooled upon to see via the media on Africa. And while that is the impression and case in some African countries, there is so much more to convey. The title in its statement form is something that's quite incongruous to that of my experience. And I can convey and wish to convey that as a South African and African, and also through my personal and business experiences. Africa has weaknesses, of course, but opportunities and huge potential. So in looking at this title and coming to talk about the title, I indeed went and did some research and got some statistics. So essentially, if I had to relate to lack of drinkable water in Africa, nearly 1 billion people in Africa do not have access to clean, safe water. That's about 1 in 8 people on the planet. Poverty in Africa often being caused by a lack of access to clean water and proper sanitation. And of course, some of the reasons given being climate. Only 10% of the total African population live in the valley of the second longest African river, the Congo, and that's its most significant source of water. The place where people live. If one lives in, of course, a bigger city, this is supported sometimes by functioning urban infrastructure and sewage systems, different from villages where water in the main is borne by young girls and women, leaving, of course, no room for education. Non-safe water sources, agriculture, which employs up to 60% of the working population, where 95% of farmers rely on rainwater, government and conflict. So you have difficulty in areas with persistent conflicts where water spills, just like oil, across several countries, impact of corruption, mismanagement of resources, bad investment. And of course, one of the most important conditions for access to drinking water is transport, infrastructure, sewage systems, and pipelines. But understandably, if you look at that, you look at the other side of the coin, an opportunity in line with a growing global demand for clean water, more stringent regulation, increasing environmental concerns, and wastewater treatment systems. Reading up on food insecurity, another aspect of the title, similar causes, poverty, conflict, climate, lack of investment in agriculture, and unstable markets. Africa's energy poverty. Africa is actually very rich in energy resources, but most of that potential on the continent is unexploited. To date, just look at the statistics, the continent with the richest solar resources in the world has installed only 5 gigawatts of solar PV. That's less than 1% of the global total. There is also a huge need for policymakers to address the persistent lack of access to electricity, clean cooking, and unreliability of electricity supply. Estimates are that by 2040, more than 25% of Africa's total energy will come from clean sources. Despite that, Africa is home to 17% of the world's population, but currently accounts for just 4% of global power supply investment. So mobilizing this type of investment is really a significant undertaking, but can be done if policy and regulation are put in place to improve utilities efficiency and also more effective use of public funds to catalyze private capital. Nurturing Africa's own financial sector is also critical for long-term financing to energy projects. Africa is also home, as you know, to many mineral resources that drive global energy transitions. The DRC accounts for 2/3 of global cobalt production. South Africa produces 70% of the world's platinum. Robust regulation and oversight mechanisms are essential to ensure that revenues produce positive results for local communities and to minimize negative environmental impact. Healthcare. 5 African countries have been quoted as doing well in attaining universal healthcare coverage or health coverage: South Africa, Tanzania, Kenya, and Zambia, and Rwanda. Rwanda, interestingly enough, the country's budget ensures that the health sector gets over 20% of funding. There has also been literature quite outspoken of the need by African governments to take the Abuja Declaration seriously. That's a pledge made by the AU members to increase their health budget to around at least 15% of the state's annual budget. But when you look at the defense budget, you see state-of-the-art military equipment is being bought. So it's not about poverty, it's really about genuine political commitment and about political goodwill. Recent studies have also highlighted deficiencies in health systems across the continent. Just one statistic I wanted to bring up was less than one intensive care bed per 100,000 people across Africa. That's quite insane. COVID-19, let's just get to the COVID-19 as a case in point. While such African countries as Tanzania and Burundi basically chose to simply ignore the dangers of the virus, or you got a lagging on testing and contact tracing like Nigeria, South Africa did everything by the book. In March, it instituted one of Africa's strictest lockdowns. 5 months later, the country had the world's 5th biggest outbreak. South Africa's COVID-19 crisis collided with its ailing economy and dysfunctional politics. And just like many places in the world, we have a fight between lives and livelihoods. On the medical front, South Africa must deal with COVID-19, even though the country has the world's biggest number of people infected with HIV and one of the world's largest numbers of tuberculosis sufferers. So these are some of the statistics that I wanted to bring forward in terms of the first part of the title. But really, I wanted to convey something else, a different take, my take on my African experience, which came, of course, not only from my being South African and my exposure as one, and that's a completely different and very interesting topic, but also from my experience as Anthill, in Anthill. Anthill was basically an entrepreneurial and is an entrepreneurial vehicle set up to capitalize on the 21st century sub-Saharan African opportunities by focusing on various sectors and bringing together entrepreneurship, money, and opportunity in Kenya. It was founded in 2013, which at the time, 7 of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world were in Africa. And the continent was increasingly moving into the global limelight as a promising investment destination. Hence, you got the African lions versus the Asian tigers contest. And currently, the continent is home to 6 of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world. Ethiopia is the fastest growing economy in Africa and the 2nd fastest growing economy in the world. Ethiopia's economy has experienced strong, broad-based growth compared to the region, and whereas it is currently struggling with low per capita income, it aspires to reach a lower middle income status by 2025. To propel it forward, the government is implementing much needed infrastructure to make Ethiopia into a manufacturing hub and attract foreign direct investment. Rwanda is the 3rd fastest growing economy in the world. Rwanda, the small, hilly, landlocked and densely populated nation with a GDP size of $10 billion, has bounced back since the infamous genocide of 1994, which decimated its economy. It has not only ensured political stability, but it has rehabilitated its economy better than pre-1994. And we're seeing substantial improvements in living standards, social development, life expectancy, and reduction in poverty. Rounding out the top 10 of really the fastest growing economies in the world, you have Cote d'Ivoire, you have Djibouti, Cambodia, Senegal, and Mongolia, which are the next 5 fastest growing economies. And of course, you have some of the poorest countries in the world in 2020, which are in Africa. So for me, when I was looking at this title and the topic, it was really interesting and an interesting question as to what is required to transition a country from being mostly agrarian, with a huge population or proportion of the population living in rural areas, low productivity, disease, high infant mortality, lack of potable water, and poor infrastructure, to a highly urbanized one, where citizens enjoy access to healthcare, education, housing, with high productivity, strong service sectors, and freedom of movement because of infrastructure. Within decades, many Asian countries made the transition, and some African countries are well placed to make this transition. Most of this achievement is attributable to seemingly miraculous growth, but there has been a discernment of factors that led to the growth. The improvement of the average household income, which improves when the largest number of people involved or get involved in technology-based productivity work. Even agriculture needs to be high-tech and include agro-processing, and this is a path currently being followed by Ethiopia. Second, state intervention and robust national leadership is required. It's critical. The economic strategies of successful countries were influenced by leaders who were committed to rapid development. They had a focus on growing this human capital. This in turn led to increased productivity, increased household incomes, and an improvement in the general standard of living. Timeframes, if you look at timeframes, you're looking at a focus, it's a long run. Examining the economic trajectory of some countries between 1960 and 2016 suggests that it can take about 25 years for such a transition. Another key area of focus among the Asian tigers has been investment in their youth. But the youth need education to be academically and technically ready to explore the boundaries of knowledge and technology for their own benefit and that of their countries. Africa should exploit this youth dividend as its most important natural resource. Empowering is certainly not always about giving money or resources, but an open door policy which will create room for youth to discover their potential. Youth shouldn't be seen as a security threat, but really are the leaders of tomorrow. They need to be involved in nation building and programs that seek to improve their well-being. Participation, I like this phrase, participation leads to ownership. It's interesting because social media reflects what happens in real life. If you do not have healthy dialogues in a society, that will be reflected in the social media. And we have seen the transformative power of social media. Young people in Africa live in interesting times in which they can help in transforming their societies. There's a great human potential, human capital, and great natural resources in Africa. Africa's greatest resource, I really believe, is her people and her youth, and empowerment of women is key. Now, women in Africa are mostly employed in informal sectors or informal activities. We all know what this means: low productivity, low incomes, low prospects. There are the constraints: access to education, credit, and markets. The gains to be made by overcoming these constraints are immense, and particularly through girls' education. There's an African adage which says, if you educate a boy, you train a man. And if you educate a girl, you train a village. I came from a country which can teach the world, I believe, about transformatory power. There's still a lot of work to be done in South Africa, but it's got so many lessons, so many amazing lessons. I went to Kenya, where I saw pride of people, strong connection to community, entrepreneurship, a vibrant private sector benefiting from a very well-educated and entrepreneurial workforce, private equity funding sources and incubator hubs for great startups within Africa and for Africa, with a need for African technologies that can share with the world its own entrepreneurial spirited lessons. African technologies so focused on digital for rural penetration and the way of the new world. I visited Angola, really a magnificent country where I saw private investment build farm-to-fork operations and transform places in the south, which were ravaged by war, to growing towns with banks, shopkeepers, women buying their own cars, and the whole entrepreneurship enterprise being responsible for 1/3 of Angola's egg production, where one should understand that the main retail distributors and supermarkets import around 80% of everything they sell. Those investors made great money on their investments by making impactful investment, doing well and doing good. I also traveled to Luanda and saw the squatter camps just outside Luanda. Luanda has one of the highest, if not the highest, rental rates in the world. And one of the main reasons for my going to Angola was really to see this inequality, to understand it. You see, during the first decade of the 21st century, Angola was one of the fastest growing in the world, relying on strong oil and diamond sectors, although with high inequality and vast corruption. Nearly 1/3 of all Angolans are illiterate, and many support themselves as subsistence farmers. My belief is that so much depends on leadership and investment in Africa's amazing people. And those who come to Africa, of their need to be humble and in touch with the people. Seeing reams, for example, in Angola, of social housing projects abandoned by the locals, where really they look more like prisons than homes, and realizing just how out of touch some of those who come to Africa come with a sense of Africans being beggars, and sometimes the locals themselves seeing themselves as beggars and not as the beautiful rich people and countries that they have, and they are. Getting lastly to the exclamation or the question mark. The challenge of poverty reduction is in creating wealth. If one says poverty reduction, one is talking exactly about the aid phenomenon. Medicines, food relief, peacekeepers in civil war, and that's not productive, but it's really treating symptoms. Wealth is a function of income, wealth creation, and entrepreneurship, putting money where it can grow, support private wealth and knowledge. As I've heard it said, you never become rich by holding out a bowl and turning a place into a charity case. Aid is not destructive. Feeding a village is not destructive. The mistake is the ignoring of the norms and habits for a village to succeed, to utilize opportunity and turn it into advantage. We lack institutional and policy frameworks for Africa to make it possible to benefit. Despair and hunger, although part of the reality, is not the only reality, but the smallest part of that. There are 53 countries in Africa with conflicts in only 6 countries. Africa is currently the youngest continent in the world. By 2050, more than half of the world's population growth will be in Africa. The size and pace of growth is unprecedented, and it will bring with it equally unique challenges and opportunities for Africa. Whilst there will be an even greater strain on already limited resources, there will also be an immense supply of potentially entrepreneurial youth to help solve problems around the continent. In Africa, lack of formal infrastructure means a smartphone is often the best gateway to access everyday services or finance or start a business. This has propelled the continent to the forefront of the new digital economy, leapfrogging over the rest of the world with solutions such as M-Pesa and Andela. Today, Africa has 16% of the world's population, 17% already said, and just 2% of the world's doctors. Yet this undersupply has created a market for new health tech companies aiming to plug the gap, from Silicon's Zipline to Rwanda's Babel. From Alibaba to Google to Microsoft, companies are waking up to the opportunities in Africa and also creating programs to nurture talent and empower entrepreneurs. There are programs such as eFounders Program, Netpreneur Prizes, Forum of Young Global Leaders created to empower Africa's young entrepreneurs to not only succeed in their own ventures, but to return home and demonstrate to others to build inclusive business models for the digital era. There is much to highlight in the scale of potential the continent holds in tapping into youth and entrepreneurship to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals over the next decade as a universal call to action to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that all people enjoy peace and prosperity by 2030. Let us not forget some fundamentals of what is required today to survive and prosper. I've heard it called the AI quotient. We know about the IQ, intelligence quotient, we know of the emotional quotient, EQ, but AQ is the adaptability quotient, or even the survival quotient, resilience and courage. In line with the intense capacity of the African people to bear such suffering and bounce back, and the capacity for healing and hope, they have that adaptability quotient. And I wish Africa, its peoples, all the blessings in the world. And I really thank you for participating in this Zoom talk to you. Thank you.
Marcelle, I really want to thank you so much. You know, your passion comes through. It really is. You have a deep connection to the African soil. And wow, it really was very special, a very insightful presentation. I also would like to, at this point, just thank my very good friend Larry Pfeffer for organizing the talk tonight, together with also a very close and dear friend Roy Scher, from the head of the Jerusalem branch of Telfed. And I'd like to now give over to Roy to open the forum to any comments or questions from our viewers. So Roy, if you could...
Thanks, Liz, and Marcelle, thanks for, you've got a wealth of knowledge, product award, amazing. And your presentation is really highly professional. Dafka, I have a question for you. Talk about high-tech and education as being key to success, especially with the youth. Maybe it's a silly question, but besides yourself, who's got this wealth of information, how many other people, as Liz said, with passion like yourself, know what's going on and know what the potential is in Africa as a whole continent? And perhaps the time has come and time is right to get a group of people like Bezos and Zuckerberg and Bill Gates and Warren Buffett together and invest, not for making back money, but for educating and turning Africa into its potential that it could get to. What's your take on that?
You know, when I came to Anthill, which was a couple of years ago, I was a little bit, I think, ahead of my time, because I was wondering why you didn't have a situation whereby there was more, let's call it even from the US, although Europe there's a connection between Europe, of course, and Africa, but seeing private equity going into Africa or African countries from let's say the US, that could tap into even startups, their technologies. I mean, I came to, and sorry to digress, I came to Anthill and to Kenya with this view in mind that, wow, I'm going to bring Israeli technologies to plug into opportunities in Kenya and package it with money. And what I found was Africa has its own technologies that maybe it doesn't have to necessarily be the best of the breed. But what you're finding today is the digital technologies which Africa, like we were talking about M-Pesa, you know, you're getting a situation where African technologies are leading because a new economy, your digital economy, that's what's happening. It's a new economy. That's going forward. Whether it's healthcare, whether it's in the financial markets, etc. And so at that particular time, I had to kind of assess, hey, what's going on with the financing and why isn't there more support in terms of private equity? And I actually turned to the model of Anthill turned even to become the investment banking vehicle, but with the connection to private equity funds, who you're finding is very interesting. Private equity funds, which are also based in Africa, for Africa, and that was what I was tapping into, as well as European sources. Now, I think that actually today, even when you look at like the fastest growing economies, there really is, I do believe that you have, as we said, the Microsofts, the Googles, the Alibaba, they've woken up and they are promoting programs for entrepreneurship. Also, you have a lot in terms of the diaspora of Africans, let's call it in the US, where there are programs which, for example, in Harvard, I know there's a program which leverages the diaspora Africans to take their technologies back into Africa, or what they've learned in terms of even management, and take it back into Africa for the African countries, for their own countries where they came from. So I think that I do think there needs to be more. There's definitely needs to be more and more investment, and I believe that if it's going to be investment where it's done on the basis of not we're coming, you know, because you are, as I said, you're not beggars. And the fact that Africa has the opportunities is the same. It's the other side of the coin as far as the hand is concerned. The investors need great opportunities, and the opportunities, of course, need the money. So I see more and more. I also see, of course, through the media. I see what I'm reading. There was an article I posted on LinkedIn which spoke about the different entrepreneurship which Africans actually, or Africa could actually teach the world. And so it's a different kind of entrepreneurship, and all these kind of things I think would be great if there could be more and more focus on it, because there's just, you know, huge opportunity with such a burgeoning young population, and the growth in terms of, or let's say moving from, let's say a lower income to a middle income status, etc. Sorry if it was a long-winded answer.
Great, good answer. Anybody else who's got a question to ask Marcelle?
I guess I'll ask a question, Marcelle, okay? You painted, I'm very impressed by your presentation. You gave a very broad and a longer, I guess, a middle term or long-term view of Africa, how it's emerging, or parts of it are emerging rapidly. The question is, along another dimension, what can be done in the meanwhile? For example, what is the role of, or the need for organizations like Innovation Africa, or investments by Hugh Buffett for clean water and waste treatment, the World Food Organization or something like that in the UN, which provides surplus grains to Africa. What is the need in this direction? And what is the potential?
Larry, what I see is the fact, and thanks for the question, what I see is the fact that, look, even in 2016, when I went, at that time when I went to Angola, I went together with an impact investment fund. And their model had worked because of the fact that, of course, you had to bring investment. Of course, you can't, even today, when you look at projects in Africa, you know, there's so many that would come to do EPC, you know, just the engineering, procurement, construction, but the financing, they don't bring. I think if there's a model where actually those that actually have the knowledge of putting, let's say, sustainable models, let's say in agribusiness, okay, sustainable model, it had to actually, the model that I saw in Angola was, it was a project which, as I said, went from farm to fork. So it was the whole cycle. It grew the maize to feed the chickens, to hatch the eggs. Also, there was a dairy element. And then what you had was you had nothing. It was a model where you brought in, where, let's say, the farmers were earning, I don't know, they were, from what I can remember, really $1 a month. They were earning so little. And you actually incentivized them to earn more, to produce more. You did bring the financing, you did bring the technology, you put it down there, but you created, the whole value chain was taken care of. And then you had not only that, it was taken care of because you had retail, they went into retail. So you had shopkeepers, you had these women who suddenly could afford to buy cars. Suddenly banks were sprouting. And you had it in a place where there was not an elephant anymore. There wasn't a bird. You couldn't hear a bird anymore because the place had been completely decimated. So, you know, Innovation Africa, and they've done amazing work in terms of bringing technologies to African countries. I'm less on the, to be honest, I'm less on the NGO space. I've always come from more the investment, where you've got an investor who's saying, hey, I want to do well. There's no doubt I want to do well, because he's not coming as a charity case. He's not coming, he wants to do well. And that's where I think you have to come from. He wants to be in a situation whereby he's going to put the buck down, but he wants to get a bang for his buck. And at the same time, he does want to do well. And I'd like to see definitely more impact investment funds that do exactly that. That would be wonderful. Love to see more impact investment funds. Yeah.
I don't quite understand. Let me ask. I don't quite understand. Are you saying basically that besides there's no room for these kind of projects, the only necessity is investments and enhancing the development and accelerating business culture? There's no room for things like Innovation Africa. There's no room for Howard Buffett or Bill Gates.
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
So can you address that? You know, what is the role of that?
You know, as I said, there, and I don't know too much in terms, you know, I don't know too much in terms of their model, their financial model. I don't know anything as far as that's concerned. So it would be wrong for me to opine. I mean, the fact that they bring amazing technologies to Africa, again, it's not coming necessarily with the fact of bringing, I don't look at it in the same way as I look at necessarily aid agencies. I look at it in a different role. But again, I've come from the, and that's to be celebrated, absolutely to be celebrated. My model was, as I said, I didn't come from that space. I definitely see technology, but technology together with investment. So I don't know to which, what extent Innovation Africa brings money. They bring technology, they implement the technology. What I'm talking about is a different thing that I saw in terms of, as I said, a private equity fund with almost $1 billion behind it. So heavy hitters that could bring money, that could set up a hospital, that could employ doctors, that could take that to a different level. Similarly, in terms of what I'm talking about, a sustainable model like I was explaining regarding the agro-processing business that I saw in Angola, where they required something like, I think it could have been about $100 million, and did, you know, created so much more in terms of the value chain. That's what I'm really talking about.
Okay, Marcelle, can I just ask, from following on from what you just said, I've been to Ethiopia, to Addis Ababa quite a few times on my trips back to South Africa, and I've spent time in Addis, and I've seen the transformation. But and I've seen within a year and a half or 2 years, a whole railway system being developed from nothing, where a few years ago there was nothing, and all of a sudden they have a tremendous, well-run railway system. The problem is that a lot of this investment was done by China, and there are a lot of Chinese workers in Ethiopia, tremendous amount. And when I was speaking to the local people, not all of them are that happy, because they feel in a way that it could be like a recolonization of the country by China, because now they are indebted to China. Is this a problem, or do you see this as a potential problem that you can have these superpowers that are coming in to help, but obviously they're doing it for financial gain as well? But in a way, if the countries can't pay them back, then these countries have a strong foothold and a hold over these countries as well. And in a way, it's a type of colonial recolonization of these countries. And in a way, I saw a little bit of this in Ethiopia.
I think it's if you ask me, it's a major issue. I mean, I can compare Ethiopia to, for example, Kenya. When I traveled in Ethiopia, indeed, I saw a lot of, you know, Chinese that had come in, Chinese workers. I think that there is an awakening to that. I think there's more of an awakening to that in terms of giving away your resources.
Yeah.
And on the basis of that, being able to actually get debt financing from, let's call it China. And then you default on that debt payment, and wow, you have to, you know, you are indebted to the country. I think that's definitely, again, I was very much involved in the private sector, less in terms of government, where you see still huge amounts of corruption. And so these are government projects that the Chinese are coming in. And also from the point of view of bringing the Chinese workers, that's, I believe, not on, unless there's an investment actually in the local population. So I think the model should be different. I think that's different to what I've read, for example, of Jack Ma, of Alibaba, where they really are investing in the people, entrepreneurship programs and things like that. That's a different ballgame altogether. But in terms of, yes, governments, the Chinese government coming and doing it on the basis of what we're talking about, I think that's perilous. That's perilous for Africa. And yes, indeed, I agree with you.
Thanks. Okay. If there's anybody else who has a comment or a question. I think you really...
Hi, I'd like to say something. I'm Jeff Levine. I'm new to this forum. I haven't met you, Marcelle.
Hi.
Basically been a CFO for a lot of tycoons who've had big interest in Africa, some successful, some not successful. And my personal feeling is that these tycoons have taken advantage of Africa, and they haven't really given anything back to Africa. I don't know if that's possible today, but let's put that aside. At the moment, I'm exploring a lot of things in impact investing, ESG, and all these things. And the point you raised about this, the lack of water, I mean, that's a big problem. So how, if you had a unlimited amount of pot of money, what would be the solution to that?
It would definitely require, the, of course, the technology, okay? So I don't know in terms of homegrown technologies in the wastewater recycling area. I can talk about a project that I'm very connected to, and that's a project in terms of bottles, plastic bottles, recycling, okay, which fits into waste management, whatever. There is a situation where indeed it's a venture which there are major players in, overseas that are going in with local partners to set up waste management facilities on a large scale. It requires a lot of money. It requires also a good partner on the African countryside. It would be both technology and money. That's exactly.
Yeah, but with respect to waste, I've done a lot of research on waste management, waste recycling, and it hasn't really taken off, and it's not going to really take off. We're looking at water as an issue, drinking water. Obviously, you can say maybe you can recycle sewage, but plastic bottles is not going to help you get more water.
No, not. So on the basis of water, again, I mean, we know of certain Israeli technologies are doing amazing things with water. And we know of implementation in certain countries. It's both the technology, but in order to be able to even penetrate in the country, you're going to have to bring investment. You're going to have to put investment into, let's call it penetration of these technologies in the country. So that's what it is. It's technology and investment. It's needed.
If you work investment, so the question is an investment is a charity? Because I mean, again, it's hard to justify an investment. Maybe I don't know. I haven't gone into, but is there such a thing as a social impact bond for Africa?
There are bonds. I don't know enough about the social impact bonds. I know there's, in the past I've come across them, but I don't know. I don't have enough knowledge as far as that's concerned. I do know on the water front, there have been some interesting initiatives in terms of, even from the point of view of profitable, very profitable in terms of being able to sell water back at a certain price, okay? Clean water, recycling the water. I think there's a lot of opportunities. I think it has to be looked at more in depth, but I'm sure there's definitely something that can be done there, and that is being done there.
Okay, because the other problem is finding the viable projects and local partners. So do you have any insight into that in that area?
Yeah. Angel started off with, funny enough, we started off in 3 areas. We started off in consumer-facing, I call them consumer-facing sectors, because those are the fastest growing sectors. So essentially, we started off in infrastructure technologies, and that was like across the board, all kinds of things. Financial services, and of course, there was a special situation in terms of, it was very interesting because Kenya in 2012 found oil for the first time. But essentially, we landed up doing our first project in agribusiness. We weren't even concentrating on agribusiness, but we had a really terrific partner in East Africa. And so, yeah, I mean, the scope has been broadened to many sectors, and I do agree with you that even the way we work today and I work today is you have to have your local champions. You really do. And it's a long process. It's such a long process to building that trust and building that relationship. Absolutely. Because those are golden. Those are absolutely golden. And you might have to go through many iterations of the partners before you realize you've hit on somebody that you can rely on, trust, work with well, etc. But yeah, we don't define ourselves to one, it's across the board.
So, and this fund or this company, I don't know, is that still active today? What is the situation?
Yes, we're active. We have partners in the UK. We actually look at projects, and because we're coming more from the money, so it's more being tapped into private equity funds, debt funders, lenders, and then of course being tapped in on the other side in terms of the opportunities in certain countries. It's not like I can say that's the interesting thing. You know, we started off in Kenya, expanded to that allows for an expansion into East Africa. We have good representation in Ghana, Nigeria to a certain extent. It just depends. And of course there's South Africa, but it just depends on the country in terms of whether I can say, hey, we have a champion there, and we're able to do something. But Ghana takes care of the rest of West Africa. Kenya takes care of East Africa. Some countries, of course, are very difficult, and I don't work in them really. I'm DRC, Congo. So it really just depends.
So would you see the problem is money, or the problem is projects or partners? Where's the bottleneck today?
Where's the focus? Where's the bottleneck?
No, the bottleneck. The bottleneck is money, or is it projects? Or
they're both. I mean, it's both. It's both. It really is both. You know, you come across the fact that the funders are looking for good returns. They're looking for companies that are already profitable. It's tough still. You know, it's a worldwide thing in terms of startup capital. It's a difficult one. Across the board, I can't say, you know, across the project the other day that was put in my lap, Greenfield looking for 65 million. I mean, how's it going to happen? Yes, huge opportunity, a big factory in agro-processing, but not everybody on my book would absolutely go for something like that.
Of course, yeah.
Really just depends. It's like a menu. It's like a menu, honestly. Some investors that I have like this, some investors like that. Some of the people that I know can bring this, some can bring that. And then they don't take off. You know, you work. These things take a substantial amount of time to be able to, yeah, get them to fruition. So that's what it is.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else who wants to leave a comment, ask a comment or question? Yes. Okay, so Marcelle, I just want to mention just something. I know I'm going back to Ethiopia, but if you look back at Ethiopia, say 30 years ago, 20 years ago, the image of Ethiopia was unfortunately starving kids with the extended bellies and the war with Eritrea. And then you look at Ethiopia today, I think Ethiopian Airlines, they did something which was indigenous to the people. They created a hub, and Addis Airport became the center. And today, Ethiopian Airlines has been voted, I think, Africa and one of the top world airlines. And it's amazing. And they started from scratch, and they had their own model, and they're reliable. And I've flown them many times, and it's a very successful Ethiopian local company, and it's got major ramifications because the people that work there, the money filters to their family and it builds up the economy. So there's a lot of promise, and what you spoke in your incredible presentation is there's so much promise, there's so much positivity in Africa. You know, one looks at Africa today and there's such potential, and I think you've explained it you articulated so well in your talk that you gave tonight, but there is tremendous potential there, and the people are amazing, and we just have to tap in to the right people, and you are definitely are. And after hearing your talk, you are really one of those that can help tremendously with the Africa situation, and the situation in Africa and the potential for help. Well, you really are helping, and your talk, I think, it's been wonderful.
Thanks, Les. Thanks, everybody. Believe in Africa, love Africa, and yeah, want to do more. So, thanks for the opportunity.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, take care.
We look forward to hearing more from you, Marcelle, and on behalf of the WITS alumni in Israel and Telfed and Old Mizrahi, we want to take this opportunity to really thank you for giving of your valuable time and your wonderful presentation tonight. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much to you all. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night.